In architecture in Japan, there is a veranda. And always in olden times, there was a space called veranda. And veranda is not an English word. It's a Sanskrit word. It's a Buddhist word. And it's to meet. In Japanese, it's called engawa. En is to meet. And this is the space where man meets nature. And this veranda it's not yes or no. It could be maybe. It's not white or black, but it's infinitesimal of gray. That's what Miyatake was trying to create.
He didn't spend too much time with the family. He was really putting 100% into his work that he loved so much. But once in a while, he'll take us to snow or something. And boy, it's a big treat for us because we hardly ever get to go anywhere. Even then, he would have his camera with him. Once we get there, he parked the car, and you look around for him, he's gone. Never see him until about 4 or 5 o'clock when the sun starts going down and it's time to go home, it's getting cold. And then you wonder where your father is. Far away beyond, he's walking back towards the car. As soon as he gets to the car, he says, okay, let's go home, you know. And all that time, he's roaming around taking photographs of scenery.
Toyo is fascinating because not only was he a photographer who had artistic aspirations, he had a business, and he was a community documenter.
Remember one time when a couple came in and had their wedding picture taken and they came to reorder?
Oh, yeah?
He liked certain ones, and they chose the one that he didn't like.
Oh.
And he says, and they wanted a 16 by 20 picture.
Oh, enlargement,
and,
huh?
Enlargement, huh? He says, I won't be caught dead with that.
And I have pictures of the same dance taken by newspaper photographers. And generally it's, okay, get in the pose. I'm gonna snap it. Are you ready? Type of thing. Toyo-san never, he said, Lady-san, you've got to do the whole dance for me. So if he liked what I was doing, he would just snap it right then and there.
Little Tokyo of the teens and 20s was an exciting, vital place. There were movie theaters, there were community organizations, there were businessmen, but there were also many Japanese migrants who came to the United States to pursue artistic activity as photographers, as painters, as poets. There was a tremendous degree of interaction between Japanese-American artists and Euro-American artists. And Toyo Miyatake was an important player in that scene.
This is a photograph of my mother my father took while he was, well, I guess you could call it courting her or trying to get her attention. And with this photograph, he got second prize on a photo contest sponsored by Ralph Shimpo in those days. The only way he knew how to court her was the excuse of taking picture, because he was a very shy man, and so he used photography, which he was pursuing, as his excuse to have her all the time. My father was never a businessman. He was known for the fact that when he takes photograph, he never has a bill ready. The only thing he wanted to see was a happy customer, and that was enough for him. My mother decided she better go to the studio, take care of the business end of it. That's when, I guess, things start getting better. So my father was able to concentrate strictly on creating photographs.
A number of Japanese Americans in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle took up the avocation of art photography. Like Miyatake, a few of them were professional photographers. They had portrait studios. They sold cameras, or they worked for this. In LA, they worked for the Hollywood studios, maybe doing retouching, working in the labs. But actually, most didn't. Most did other things, fairly menial, low-paying jobs, actually, which makes it even more surprising that they took up the expensive hobby of art photography. Among the nearly 200 Issei photographers in the country, the most active group was in Los Angeles.
My brother knew Toyo Miyatake, so I used to go there, visit there sometime. Into that, you know, I got into the photography. Furugedo, it was the bottom, and we had the one room borrowed for camera club. That's where we used to meet, and they had a one room for developing. So anytime if you want to take picture or you want to develop there, one room was open. Everybody had a key, and they had a nice enlarger, so you could enlarge it.
Photography was one medium where Japanese Americans were actually innovators. And maybe that's in part because photography as a medium was relatively new as an art form.
I almost could not pick up a publication that didn't include some of their work. If you were a pictorial photographer in the 20s, this is the publication you wanted to be in. In this publication, there are 57 reproductions of prints. Of those, 13 are by Japanese Americans. 10 of those 13, Los Angeles area Japanese. I think that gives some sense of the degree to which they were shown and exhibited and admired.
I think I really first met him at these artist groups. I must have been in my teens, and I was invited to attend one of the banquets. And I said, "Oh, Mother, I don't want to go. There'll be all these old people," and it wasn't like that at all.
In the early 1920s, a group of painters, poets, and photographers formed an interdisciplinary artist group called the Shakudosha. And the stated aim of the Shakudosha was the furtherance of all forms of modern art.
Miyatake was a member of the Shakudosha. Probably one of their greatest accomplishments were the exhibits, 4 exhibitions by Edward Weston in Little Tokyo. These 4 shows saw Weston at this tremendous change in his aesthetic, and they got to be firsthand witnesses, and it had an impact on the work.
My father knew Mr. Weston quite well because he learned photography from him. When Mr. Weston was in Glendale selling his photograph, he was having a hard time because it was in the 1920s when the Depression was on. My father talked to the club member, and if they would sponsor an exhibit, they were more than happy to do that because they liked his work so much. Well, sale was great.
When Miyatake's work really took a dramatic turn and became even more modernist is after he met Michio Ito.
Michio Ito was a Japanese choreographer who had done work in Germany and London to great success. He then moved to New York in the 1920s and came to Los Angeles in 1929. And somewhere around that time, he met Toyo Miyatake. And Toyo became, in a way, Ito's LA photographer.
Ito taught Miyatake a lot about lighting, particularly theatrical lighting and such, and it was one of the reasons that Miyatake was interested in working with him. Also, dance, for many pictorial photographers, dance was a perfect subject because you had people in costumes, they were doing interesting movements. Where it really gets interesting are these photographs. What he did with this is he takes the swirling motion of Ito and he completely abstracts it. We don't see the dancer at all anymore, but he's turned into these swirling forms of light. For me, they're kind of depictions of the unity of light and motion. That we can't see the motion without light, and the light provides this opportunity to see these sweeping shapes.
There is a conjunction in English grammar, and. We say space and time. We separate time, space. In Japanese language, there is no and. Jikan kukan, there's no and. Time exists in space. So those conflicts, I'm sure Miyatake's and Michio's had a great conflict between the daily life, how they spoke about their art. It's that veranda in between the space, and that gray space is so delicate. For example, there is a space in the monastery where there is a bathroom, and there's a small light comes just below the walls, and the shoji, tiny shoji screen there. And occasionally there's a mosquito hitting that white shoji. That sound, if you listen very carefully, that's what we call that buffer space. And I think Toyo Miyatake was trying to get that feeling.
World War II changed everything. As a result of racism and wartime hysteria, over 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated, and a lot of the work was lost. Artists, painters, photographers, they had a very short amount of time to pack 2 suitcases with just the essentials. chances are they would have to leave their art behind.
I was playing outside in camp one day, and then all of a sudden he just called me and he told me to come inside. He wanted to tell me something, so I thought he was gonna, I thought I did something wrong. I was gonna get bawled out, but it was entirely different. He said, I have something I have to tell you. Pausing after that, he told me, we're put into camp like this, and this kind of thing should be all recorded. And as a photographer, I have a responsibility to do that. I still didn't know what he was talking about. And then he told me that he snuck in a lens and film holders, and he's going to have a wooden box camera made for it so he could take some pictures with us. I thought of the time that I had to turn my camera in the Los Angeles Police Department because we weren't allowed to have a camera, and now he's going to make a camera. I thought, oh, he's sure taking a lot of chances. He says, this kind of thing should never happen again. I have to record everything.
I think Meiji men have very much different world themselves. We felt it as a young man listening to Toyo Miyatake talk. He mentioned that he never is satisfied. You know, even the physical stance is different. You know, sebone o matsugu, meaning the straight your vertebrae kind of attitude. You know, and never look to the camera, for example. It's always in a different direction, look into something, maybe a future or dream.
Miyatake did continue on as a commercial photographer, although I don't know as an art photographer that he continued on. and produced work like he did before the war. So that aspect of it was lost. And it was lost not only because of the relocation, but it was also lost because of the death of pictorialism.
Well, everything's changing. In Buddhism, we call this impermanence of all things. People of that period, they worked hard, they create families. It's just not just one Toyo Miyatake, but the entire community was a Toyo Miyatake.
Toyo Miyatake became an increasingly influential documenter of post-war Japanese-American life. He continued to photograph the Nisei Week parades and festivals. He continued to photograph for the Rafu Shimpo. And his photographs became a virtual archive of activities in Little Tokyo in the pre-war years.
To him, Los Angeles, especially Little Tokyo, was his favorite place to go. Because even until 2 weeks before he passed away, I used to pick him up every morning, take him to the studio in downtown. He used to walk around, visit different stores, and talk to them. And anytime that I'm a few minutes late, the telephone will ring, and he said, "What happened? You gonna pick me up?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there." And then, so I pick him up, and he'll come in the car carrying a heavy black leather bag. Wondering what that is because it's so heavy looking, but he never let it go.
And he did continue on as a commercial photographer. Nearly every Japanese-American family went to the Miyatake studio to have their wedding pictures and their family pictures taken.
Toyo-san was a kind of a lonely guy, you know. He likes to walk around Little Tokyo and used to try to figure out everybody, what they did and what their habits were. I think that's what he used to do. And that's where he learned to read human nature. And when he was taking picture, you know, sometimes he'll crack a joke or something to make the party laugh or to get the serious side of it. And he never took his picture right away, huh? No. He sometimes get to the point where the person who's being photographed got tired of waiting for him to just make his face this way or that way or up or down, you know? Certain lines had to be out.
He was on the Nisei Week board, my father was. And he used to go to the meeting, and he suggested, what about having a grand marshal for Nisei Week parade? And then, I don't know, so many years later, the general chairman suggested my father. So I told that to my father. He said, "Oh, no, 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 not me. You know, I don't belong in that kind of thing. Go tell the Nisei Week that she can't do it." He says, "No, it's too late," I told him. It's 2 weeks before the parade. They can't pick another one. So he reluctantly went on. Afterwards, I guess he was kind of happy that he was appointed because there was a picture taken and then he made an enlargement and then wrote on the bottom, "Thank you," and put it out in the front window. After he became ill, whenever he got well enough, I would pick him up and take him. He would still carry that bag. You know? So one day he looked kind of weak, so I carried it for him, and I couldn't believe how heavy that thing was. So since then, I helped him carry the bag into the car, and then he passed away. And about 1 year later, I saw that bag, so I looked in there. There was a film in the camera. So I developed it. guess that was the last picture he took. Almost like saying goodbye or something.